Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. This is the video that I was trying to make on the night of the 11th when I was interrupted by texts from Caitlin with anticipating Christ's return. She was sending pictures of the aurora, and so my family and I hurried and rushed over to the temple lot and thankfully got these amazing photos and videos, including this one that I posted on Facebook. But it seems like something is going on with Community of Christ. They posted a series of videos on the church's YouTube channel, and I listened in and I noticed a theme. I think they're getting ready for something big, some kind of change. And of course, I'm thinking about the land that they own there, the temple, as well as the auditorium. Why? Well, just in case you're new or you didn't know, the city of Zion, or the city of New Jerusalem that was supposed to be built, included 2 blocks in the center of the city, and these 2 blocks would have contained 24 temples. It would have been a 24 temple complex. So it's not just the temple lot with the primary temple, it's 24, and it's a large area. And it would seem to me, if I have this oriented correctly, that the Community of Christ temple would be over here in this eastern block. The auditorium may take up some of this space right here. I'm not exactly sure, but it's all temple land. And in order to build that city and all the temples, then, you know, that land would need to be purchased and the temples built. Now, Community of Christ and their new prophet president, Stassi D, Cramm, have spoken about if the church would ever sell the temple and the auditorium. And the answer so far is no, not at this time. But it's not something that's set in stone. We're going to talk about that toward the end of the video. But right now, we're going to focus on this series of videos that was put out, one of them by Stassi D, Cramm herself. She is the new prophet president of Community of Christ. Earlier this year, they had their version of General Conference called World Conference 2025. She's the first female prophet president of their church. And so she was ordained. I was there the day that she was ordained. I took this video outside the auditorium. So the auditorium is right across from the temple lot. As I'm videoing this, I'm on the temple lot property. And, I videoed this event and celebrated with them. I actually got to meet her. So this is her immediately after being ordained the new prophet president. And I tend to think that it's going to be a good thing for both of our churches. And before I continue, let me just say that I respect and honor Community of Christ. Of course, they have a very different understanding of scriptures. They have a very different theology, but I respect anyone who's acting in good faith and doing the best that they can. And on my channel, I don't tolerate any disrespectful comments toward other religions. I feel like some people, in my audience and just members of the church feel like they have a free pass to make jokes, make fun of, leave disrespectful comments about other religions. And here on my channel, it's not appreciated. Everybody's worthy of dignity and respect, even though we're different. So I have nothing against Community of Christ. I'm just thinking about the future and trying to figure out how prophecy is going to play out. And so that's why I'm making this video. This is not against Community of Christ. Each one of them that I've met has been kind and respectful, and I think they're good people. So a couple days after she was ordained as prophet president, so this is June 1st of this year, a couple days later, there was a tornado in Independence. I participated in that event by running away from it and seeking shelter in the Independence Visitor Center. It interrupted their world conference. One of the sessions was in progress at that time. And I looked up a map. I'm not going to show it in this video, but there's a map that shows all the tornadoes that have struck Missouri since 1950. And this was the closest one to the temple lot in all that time. Of all places, it struck a building called, the company name is Temple Engineering. It's a railroad company. They produce like chemicals for the railroad industry, but the name of the company is Temple Engineering. It's right here. So that's kind of strange, don't you think? I tend to think that Stassi D. Cramm represents a change for her church and probably a further departure from their original literal beliefs about Zion and, building the city of New Jerusalem and things like that. They're going in a different direction, as you're about to see. They basically flat out say it. I'm going to show you what they just recently said, and it's so interesting. Now, when I was in the Army, I remember going to this field training exercise, and one of the E7s, the sergeant first class, he was talking to us, the junior soldiers, and he's like, you need to think about it like this. When you see things happening here at your level, you need to be thinking, up the chain of command, all the way up to big army. And how would they plan things? How would they announce things? It's like, here we are doing this field training exercise. We're not just doing it for no reason. Think about, what we're doing here. And yeah, they're getting us ready to deploy, basically is what he was saying. And that is what happened. So last year, the church purchased the Kirtland Temple from Community of Christ. It turns out that they were in talks. This is the official announcement, or sorry, this is the official announcement. And they talk about the fact that the two churches were in talks since June of 2021. So for like 3 years, the better part of 3 years, we were in talks with Community of Christ, because it's a big transaction. And it wasn't just the Kirtland Temple, it was other things too, properties in Nauvoo and other things. And so you have to work out the details, and I don't know what that's like, but it sounds pretty complicated. And what if it's just the first phase of several other phases? I'm not saying that that's the case, but I think about our own church, and I think back to President Hinckley when he started announcing all these temples. So I have a spreadsheet here called Temples Announcements. And I wanted to answer the question, like, has the church historically announced temples during General Conference in April and October? And it turns out, no. It's only been during the presidencies of President Monson and President Nelson that all these temples have been announced during General Conference. There's been a couple exceptions, but when you go back in time, that's not the case. And let's go to this other spreadsheet. This graph shows it a little bit better. This is number of temple announcements per year. Here's President Hinckley right here. And you can see there's just this dramatic spike in temple announcements. Up until this point, if you look to the left, this is what was normal for the church. Just a temple here, a temple there. It gets a little bit more busy in the late 70s, early 80s, but then all of a sudden a huge spike. And so doesn't it make sense that you wouldn't just announce like 20 temples at a time in General Conference, but you would spread it out throughout the year? I think that's probably what was going on, because that is shocking news. That's like really big to just to dump a huge announcement like that all at once. Like, okay, we're going to be building, we're going to announce 50 temples or something like that. So you kind of stagger it, right? So with that in mind, let's see, was there anything here? Oh yeah, by the way, I've created a new spreadsheet called Timeline Community of Christ, because I want to see if I can get some of their history on a timeline. There's these different things that people have been telling me, like big changes in their church. And I need to like see it on a timeline and maybe refer to it in the future. But anyway, so going back to that sergeant in the Army, and when you see something on the ground, something that's being communicated to you, what's actually where's it coming from, and how far up the chain of command does it go? Okay, so we have this message from Stassi D. Cramm, and I definitely get the sense that something is going on. Now, these messages that I'm about to read to you, they can obviously apply at the individual level, but this could be like a multi-layered message. Like on one level, you apply this to you individually, into your family and community and all that stuff. But on, big church level, community of Christ level, this could also prepare you for bigger things. And so for the purposes of this video, imagine that what they're actually doing here is they're preparing the church for a big move, potentially the sale of the auditorium and or the temple. I'm not saying that this is what's happening, but look at this. Look at how this is worded. Okay. I may have to skip a little bit, but this is just, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of obvious, actually. Hello and welcome. I'm so glad we have this time together. I'm inviting you into my office for this Advent reflection. So that's like Christmas, Advent, because I want this to feel personal, like you've just stopped by to chat. In this beautiful and busy season, I want to share something that's been bubbling up in me as I've reflected on Mary's journey. We'll only touch on these ideas now, but if you're interested, I've written more about them on the church's website and in the November-December 2025 Herald. That's like their Leahona. I hope you'll check it out. For now, let's take a moment to reflect on Advent together. For me, Advent is a time of competing objectives. It's a season for waiting, but most of us are anything but still, right? We're busy making lists, plans, gatherings, and navigating crowded stores. But right in the middle of all that, the Advent story invites us to pause and consider a different kind of preparation. It points us to Mary, whose own life plans were completely upended by one single holy interruption. Okay, this is kind of where it starts. I should have highlighted this. So think about if you're a member of Community of Christ, there's going to be a whole spectrum of beliefs, with just like there is in any church, people that hold on to more traditional values, traditional interpretations, and then those that just like don't care about any of that. So imagine that you're a member of Community of Christ and you still expect Zion to be built or a temple complex. I don't know exactly what they expect, but imagine that you view the future of the church always headquartered in independence. Like that's not going to change. This was part of prophecy. Okay. But whose own life plans were completely upended by one single holy interruption. This is basically the theme of these 3 videos that I'm going to read from. Okay, on my table, I have a small statue of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus that I made for my mom when I was in my late 20s. As I was making it, I remember looking at all these pictures of Mary and carefully choosing the soft blues and whites because I wanted her to look serene and holy. But let's imagine the reality. Mary was a young girl, likely a teenager, engaged to be married with her whole life mapped out. Okay, so like if you're a traditionalist, you're like, yeah, we know how everything's going to go. We know prophecy. We know that we're supposed to be here in independence. Okay. And then an angel appears and tells her she will carry God's son, a child who will change the course of history. Suddenly, she has no roadmap. And I think some people in Community of Christ might feel this way with church finances. As we've talked about before, they're going to be good financially between now and 2030, as long as everything stays the same. But after that, if things get worse, then what's the roadmap? Okay, suddenly she has no roadmap, no certainty, and no control. Her family, her community, her future, all of it was suddenly at risk. And in the face of that wholly unknown, She gives us one of the most courageous responses in all of Scripture. As recorded in Luke chapter 1, verse 38, she says, "Here am I, the servant of the Lord. Let it be with me according to your word." That single, trusting yes is the heart of Advent. It challenges us to ask, what does it really mean to prepare the way for the Lord? Okay, if you're a traditionalist, you may be thinking, like, yeah, the second coming or just the future of the church. But what happens when the church runs out of money or if it's like losing membership or things like that? You're stepping into the unknown. So what do you do? Okay, our first instinct is to plan, organize, and get everything just right. But Mary's story and the whole story of our faith suggests that God's idea of preparation is different. It's less about having a perfect plan and more about two things: prophetic imagination and prophetic agility. In another interview that we're going to touch on, she points to this figure right here, Walter Brueggemann, who I don't know what denomination he belonged to. I don't think he was a member of Community of Christ, but it seems like he had kind of a liberal take on the scriptures, and I guess he introduced the idea of prophetic imagination. Where'd it go? Okay, here we go. And this is another theme of what I'm reading now and what I'm about to read: prophetic imagination. Okay, let's see. It's less about having a prophetic plan and more about two things: prophetic imagination and prophetic agility. Now, I know the word prophetic can sound a little intimidating, like you have to predict the future. But in the Bible, a prophet was an ordinary person like you or me who had the courage to speak God's truth into their world. So prophetic imagination isn't about seeing the future. It's about daring to dream what God dreams for the world. Now, of course, we don't have the concept of prophetic imagination. For us, prophets are literal. They actually see into the future and they receive messages from the Spirit and sometimes from Christ personally as to how to lead the church. And there is a plan and there is prophecy that's going to play out. So if you're a literalist in Community of Christ, it feels like she might be trying to break that up a little bit and change your way of thinking. Like, well, prophecy, it's not about seeing into the future, and we need to have prophetic agility, as she's about to say right here. And prophetic agility is the spiritual flexibility to hold our own plans loosely. So don't get too caught up in New Jerusalem or having the temple or anything like that. I'm just assuming that this might be why she's given this message. I don't want to put words into her mouth. And prophetic agility is the spiritual flexibility to hold our own plans loosely so God has room to redirect us. It's about being willing to pivot when the Holy Spirit reveals a more faithful way forward, even when it feels uncertain. The early church was full of this agility. The apostles had a great plan, ministered to the Jewish community in Jerusalem. It was focused and clear, but the Spirit had bigger ideas. Think about it. Philip was pulled away from a successful revival to go and stand on a desert road. So, like going from one place to another, like a big change in plans. All for one divine appointment with an Ethiopian official. Peter is sent to the home of a Roman centurion, a visit that shattered his ideas. Or, for you, traditionalists, things that are about to happen may shatter your ideas of what's supposed to happen. A visit that shattered his ideas of who was in and who was out. In every case, God's mission moved onward. By the way, this word right here, this is Stassi D. Cramm's motto, onward. This is one of the first things I learned about her, is that this is like her mission statement is onward. So to me, that suggests like, okay, we need to move past what we're already doing. There's like something bigger ahead. There's changes. In every case, God's mission moved onward, not because of a rigid strategy, but because people were agile enough to say yes to holy surprises, like maybe the sale of the temple and the auditorium. This is the tension we live in: preparation and surrender. Now, that is an interesting word. Preparation and surrender. We need to plan, but we also need to humbly accept that the Spirit moves in ways we can't script. There's an old Yiddish proverb that says, "We plan and God laughs." I don't believe this is a cynical laugh. I believe it's a loving, joyful laugh, inviting us into an adventure far bigger than we could ever plan for ourselves. And Mary shows us how to live in this tension. She prepared for Jesus' birth with the ordinary rhythms of life, finding shelter, leaning on family, but she also had to live with huge unanswered questions. What would Joseph do? How would her village react? She teaches us that preparing for God's promises isn't about having all the answers. It's about having a heart that's ready to trust. Okay, let's pause again. And sorry, I feel it's necessary to pause so you can see the way that I'm looking at this. So imagine that you're a traditionalist. You haven't joined the restoration branches that seem like they do hold on to those traditional beliefs, and the literal belief in prophecies and stuff like that. So imagine that they decide to move their headquarters. They sell the temple, which is their headquarters building. They sell the auditorium. You would probably have huge unanswered questions. And she's saying it isn't about having all the answers. It's about having a heart that's ready to trust, that there's something bigger than just, independence. There's something, this is grander than just some buildings. I feel like that's what's being said. Here's the challenge. We are called to prepare not for certainty, but for courage, not for control, but for mission. And what is that mission? In a world that feels so fractured and uncertain, our mission is to have a new community of tolerance, reconciliation, and love. To be a visible sign of God's coming reign. The name Advent comes from Adventus, which means a surprising arrival. I should probably highlight that, because if that's what they're planning on doing, then they may spin this, and I don't mean like spin in the bad way, but they may frame this in a way that like, oh no, this is actually part of the second coming. There's something bigger. It was never about independence. I don't know, something like that. I'm going to skip down a little bit. A story from our own church history captures this so well. Back in 1920, our church children's home faced a crisis. An outbreak of diphtheria and smallpox quarantined 8 children right before Christmas. All their holiday plans were ruined. But the healthy children chose a different path. Each night they memorized hymns. On Christmas Eve, they gathered outside the cottage and sang carols to their sick friends, breaking through the isolation with light and connection. But the story doesn't end there. On Christmas Day, after the last carol, the cottage lights were turned off. Unexpectedly, the lights suddenly came back on. So again, think about the lights literally going off in the temple or auditorium. But then, the hope of this story is, but that's not the end. There's going to be a new light that's turned back on. It's not just because the lights go off for a minute doesn't mean that it's the end. Okay, unexpectedly, the lights suddenly came back on. Inside, the quarantined children with only paper and bed sheets had created a pantomimed nativity, a holy gift of hope shared right through the window. That, my friends, is prophetic imagination and agility. Their plans were ruined, but the children pivoted. They saw a need and responded with what they had with humble, holy creativity. So it's like, okay, well, the plan has changed. We're not staying here in Independence. This isn't going to be the New Jerusalem. Let's be humble. about what just happened. We can't afford this stuff anymore. But let's get creative. And what is Community of Christ going to be moving forward? Okay. They sang in the face of sickness and discovered abundance in their meager surroundings. This is our call this Advent, to prepare our hearts to be changed, to be surprised, to cultivate that same imagination and agility. We're invited to release our tight grip on our own expectations and embrace our role as pioneers, led by the Spirit into unknown territory. So, as we journey toward Christmas, let's prepare for more than just a baby in a manger. Let's prepare for the birth of something new. Okay, the birth of something new in us, a new community. There's that concept. She said that earlier, a new community up here. And then down here, a new community. That is a sanctuary of Christ's peace, a people alive with prophetic imagination and responding with prophetic agility. Like Mary, we might feel unsure, but we are not alone. Christ is being born in us again. So it's like, it really feels like she's talking about moving on into a new phase, the rebirth of the church, which, you know what? I wasn't planning on doing this now, but let's just do it. Let's go to, there was a Salt Lake Tribune podcast. This is like a series or something like that called Mormon Land. And they interviewed her shortly after she became prophet president. And, I went through this whole thing and I took down some of it. And she said it. Sorry, I wasn't planning on doing this right now. Here's all the onward stuff. Okay, yeah, right here. President VZ, so he was the previous prophet president to her predecessor. President VZ, our previous president, he did this fabulous job in providing us with this great foundation and really re-establishing who we are. And now we need to put it into action. And so my hope is that we've gotten beyond the transcript doesn't always transcribe everything perfectly. And so my hope is that we've gotten beyond what you might call our phase of identity crisis. And it's really clear who Community of Christ is in the world today. So I think she's referring to this like really big change that has been playing out, I guess, for decades. And again, I'm trying to put together a timeline, but you've gone from, like, I think it was back in the 1920s, they did this thing called supreme directional control, which upset a lot of people. It's basically where authority in the church, I believe, became more centralized. And then much later on in the 1980s, I think in 1984, that's when they started ordaining women to the priesthood. And then I think it was in the year 2000, maybe 2001, they changed the name to Community of Christ. Although I've been told that officially and legally, in certain cases, their name is still the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But, and then there's been this like huge schism where a large part of the church broke off and you have these individual autonomous branches, collectively known as the Restoration branches. And I think that's the identity crisis that she's talking about. And in a nutshell, I think you could summarize it as they don't really believe in the original beliefs, like whatever, like prophecies of Joseph Smith, the Book of Mormon, being historical, the idea of independence literally being the New Jerusalem during the millennium. Even the second coming itself seems ambiguous. I interviewed their former president of the Council of the 12 Apostles, Linda L. Booth, And when it comes to those more literal things, whether it's resurrection, the second coming, it doesn't seem like they've like moved beyond that, I think, in their eyes. They've evolved. They feel like those are things of the past, those like prior interpretations. So I think that's, I think that's what she's talking about here. I feel like this whole Advent message could be applied at a personal level, but I feel like it could be applied at a church level. It was just like all throughout the talk. Look at all the parts that I highlighted and read. The vocabulary that was used: flexibility, redirect, rigid strategy, pivot, control, humbly accept, so on and so forth. But that's not all. So we're going to move on to this message that was published on the same day. This is by Presiding Evangelist Mareva Arnaud Tchong. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. On the church's website, it says, so she's the presiding evangelist for Community of Christ. In this role, she supports the First Presidency as a spiritual companion and serves as chaplain to the World Church Leadership Council and the Council of Presidents of 70. And then formerly, she was the president of the Council of the 12 Apostles. So the same position as Linda. Okay, so she is one of just a few others that also delivered a message. This one is called Prophetic Imagination in an Age of Fear. And I feel like it's pretty clear in this message too. It doesn't take too much reading between the lines. Okay. She says, I remember being on a mission trip. On the road, we got stuck in a huge traffic jam. Cars were at a complete standstill. From a distance, we could see dust, barriers, noisy machines, workers in action, a lot of movement, a lot of noise. But for us, no way forward. So again, Community of Christ, the financial situation, the decline of Christianity as a whole, as Stassi D. Cramm pointed out in that interview with the Salt Lake Tribune. But for us, no way forward. Then almost at the level of the construction site, a worker lifted a sign, detour. So there it is again. Pivoting, redirecting. In this case, she's saying detour. And right there, just beside us, a small road opened up. A narrower, so less church membership and maybe a more meager path than the church's original aspirations for independence in Zion. A narrower, less visible, almost hidden, but real. And it was the road that allowed us to move on. You guys just listen to these words. I feel like these words are carefully chosen. You put it all together. That's what I think is going on. That scene has stayed with me because life is often like that. We stare at the obstacle, we feel the dust, we hear the noise, and we think everything is closed. But God invites us to imagine beyond what we see, to trust that there is already a road waiting to open. I should have highlighted everything is closed. Okay. Now look at this part. Listen to this next paragraph. The prophet Isaiah spoke to a people in exile in Babylon. Their temple was destroyed. Their land lost. Their habits broken. That is a powerful sentence if that's what they're trying to convey and if they're trying to condition the membership of their church for a big change of this type. Their temple was destroyed, their land lost, their habits or, original beliefs, original interpretations, the traditions of their fathers, you could say. Their temple was destroyed, their land lost, their habits broken. Many thought, our story is over. And that's when God speaks. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? Notice God does not say someday. God says now. It's not a distant dream, but something already happening, like a seed in the ground, still unseen, but already alive. This sounds pretty ominous and it sounds pretty imminent. And then this question, do you not perceive it? It's not a reproach, it's an invitation. And as if God were saying, you're still staring at what has collapsed. What has collapsed. And I am opening a road in the wilderness. I am bringing streams into the dry land. Dare to imagine beyond what you see. This is the heart of the text. God acts in the present, even if it feels hidden, mysterious, fragile. Prophetic imagination is trusting that newness is already here and daring to walk into it. Our world often feels like that traffic jam. A lot of noise, a lot of activity, and yet for many, the sense that we are not moving forward. Look around us. The climate is changing and natural disasters remind us that our common home is fragile. Many parents wonder what kind of future will our children have. In our societies, tensions grow. Neighbors stop understanding each other. Communities turn inward. Even our churches sometimes carry disagreements that weaken us, or weaken trust. And then there are the silent fears of daily life. Fear of losing a job, fear of not keeping up, fear of growing old alone. Sometimes it is not even fear. It is habit that locks us in, comfort that lulls us to sleep, or the illusion that we can control everything until life reminds us of our limits. So again, I think this, like when they say habit, this is like a stand-in for traditions of our fathers, traditional interpretations of prophecy. Don't be in a state where you think everything is okay and all we need to do is wait, and that we can control everything. That there are limits. Now, this is obviously not our church's point of view, but I think that's what they're saying. And deep down, many whisper, why bother? What's the point? But that is exactly where prophetic imagination becomes essential. It does not erase the pain. It does not deny the struggle, but it dares to ask, what if God is already opening a way here? What if, even in despair, life could begin again in a new form? So there it is again, this whole thing about rebirth, pivoting, detour, going in a new direction. Okay, I'm going to skip down a little bit. That is what prophetic imagination can do. Take a life crushed by despair and allow a new path to appear. Not without pain, not without effort, but alive with hope. The theologian Walter Brueggemann, he's the one that we were just talking about, once wrote, quote, "The task of the prophet is not to describe the world as it is, but to imagine the world as God dreams it." End quote. The prophets in Scripture were people on the move. Okay, now, if you're a member of Community of Christ and you accept that Stassi D. Cramm is the prophet president, and they're trying to say here, well, remember in the Scriptures, the prophets were on the move. They didn't just stay in one place. Stassi D. Cramm, you could say, represents church headquarters. Just like how when we think about President Oaks or whoever the president of the church is at the time, that's where they live and that's where they work, at church headquarters. Okay, the prophets in Scripture were people on the move. They stepped out of what was familiar and walked into the unknown. They guided others forward, even in times of fear and resistance. They spoke words of truth that opened new possibilities. They sometimes hesitated, but they still set out on the road God placed before them. They walked into mystery and risk, often without knowing what would happen next. They moved forward even when it meant losing their security or leaving behind what they knew. In the same way, we as a church are called to be a people who move. You guys, I feel like it's just like it's almost like so on the surface. I don't know how you couldn't take this away from these messages. We are called to take steps of trust into the future. God is already shaping that, or sorry, trust. Okay. Take steps of trust into the future God is already shaping. We are called to live with courage, with creativity, with faith that God is present on the road ahead. I don't think I'm going to read the rest of it. It just kind of repeats. Friends, God is not calling us to stay stuck at the construction site of our fears. That's interesting imagery because you think about the temple that they have, how it's been constructed. It's actually been worked on recently. There's been repairs made. But the idea of buildings, God is not calling us to stay stuck at the construction site of our fears. God is calling us to move, to imagine beyond, to step into the unknown with trust. And then let's move on to a final quote. So this is a new entry on my spreadsheet. This is row 110 for Community of Christ. I need somewhere to save these because we may be referring back to this in the future. So I'm just going to put it here. There's just a small part of this quote that I want to share. So it's this guy right here. He's from India. The name of this video is God's Economy. And he is on the Standing High Council. I'm not sure what that means. His name is Isaac Bennett Joshua. He says, in India, I have seen that true capacity emerges not from wealth or from abundance. So in other words, like you think about our church, we have we have nice church headquarters. We do have 2 blocks in downtown Salt Lake, one for Temple Square, but in recent years, they've tried to make the entire thing really Temple Square, but Temple Square, the church office building block or whatever you want to call it, conference center, temples all over the world. Like we have a lot. We have abundance in this church. We have a lot of infrastructure, right? Well, if you're a Community of Christ and you're preparing to downsize, think of it this way. In India, I've seen true capacity emerges not from wealth or from abundance, but from faithful resilience of those in the margins. These communities do not wait for permission or infrastructure to be the church. So it's like, you guys, if we lose the temple and auditorium, that's not what makes a church, it's the people. And I would agree with that too. Of course, in our church, temples are essential, and so are meeting houses, but definitely temples. These communities do not wait for permission or infrastructure to be the church. They already are the church. Their lives proclaim the gospel. The Spirit is moving often far from centers of power. Now, remember, this is probably something that's not lost on members of Community of Christ. Independence, specifically this Temple Lot area, it's known as the center place, right? It's the center stake of Zion. And so I wonder if he's like playing off of that a little bit. The Spirit is moving often far from centers of power among the poor, the forgotten, and the hidden. If you're willing to listen and walk alongside them, the Community of Christ will discover its calling. So now I'd like to just point out a few things from this interview with Salt Lake Tribune. I'm not going to read this entire thing, but this is pretty interesting here. Interviewer, you mentioned your college education experience. What do you think that educational training, how's that helped you in your ministry? Stassi D. Cramm. Yeah, so a lot of people have asked, you've got all these different degrees. How do they all fit together? So engineers are problem solvers, right? Which is needed right now because in their church, they have a big problem. How do they continue beyond 2030? And so we look at situations, and sometimes it's things that are broken, and we try to figure out how to fix them. She goes on to talk about prophetic imagination. Okay, later on, interviewer. So you've talked about the past. Let's talk about the present and the future. How would you describe this moment in Community of Christ? Stassi D. Cramm. We had people present in Independence, and one of our people made the comment, because some people would say, gosh, Christianity is having a really hard time. Christianity is in decline. Community of Christ is in decline along with the rest of Christianity. But one person said, I didn't hear her say it directly, but she said something akin to, this doesn't feel like a church that's dying. This feels like a church that's being reborn. There it is again. From the very first, I don't know if this is the first interview that she had as prophet president, but this is within the same month. It's one of the first interviews. So it's been with her since the very beginning. The idea of onward, fixing things, being reborn. And as we read earlier, moving past the identity crisis. Okay, so this feels like a church that's being reborn, and I would underscore that. She goes on to say, with God, anything is, I think that's supposed to be possible. Wait, I think hopefully reminded everyone that with God, anything is possible, and we need to remember to dream big. Yeah, let me fix that. Sorry, I didn't go through this with a fine-tooth comb with like fixing the transcript because it's just a lot. I may do that in the future. Okay, interviewer. So I want to go to a subject that we reported on quite extensively, but I wanted to get your perspective again. The sale of the Kirtland Temple and some other historic properties and documents to the LDS Church. How has it affected the membership in the Community of Christ? Stassi D. Cramm. Yeah, so some of our members, it did not impact at all. They did not necessarily have strong ties to those locations. They understood it as part of our history, part of our story, but the physical locations, they've maybe never visited, may never visit. And so it was not critical to them. Others, I think, understood the nature of the decision and why it was, and why it was a decision that was difficult, and they understood that it was difficult. They celebrated leadership's courage and willingness to look to the future. So here it is right here. See, this is in the context of the Kirtland Temple. And now we're getting hints that it could be their temple and auditorium. They celebrated leadership's courage and willingness to look to the future and to basically invest in our future mission. And then there was clearly a group of people who were still struggling with the decision and felt very betrayed by it, and felt like leaders didn't give them enough warning about what was happening. And although we were talking about needing to make difficult decisions and everything being on the table, so see, everything being on the table, that the fact that we didn't actually ask our world conference, do you want us to sell these so we can make these choices about future mission? They felt betrayed by the absence of that opportunity. And so in those areas where those feelings exist, we're trying to be very intentional in listening and in hearing people's perspectives, what they're trying to talk about. What does transparency actually mean? And where are we transparent, and where can we be transparent? But where do leaders sometimes have to make the decisions that the conference have to sustain us to make? So this is interesting. She addresses the fact like, hey, there's some things that are just too big and it needs to happen in a discreet way. There's reasons why that has to happen. And that's our job as leaders. And that's true. I totally agree with that. So it's like any decision in a family. Not not everyone agrees, not everybody likes it. Some struggle with it, and yet we're still clinging to each other and clinging to our overall call and mission and committed to finding our way into the future together. Interviewer: are there any other items that the church might consider selling in the future? Stassi D. Cramm: we've been asked that quite a bit, and right now, the answer to that question would be no. So I can't speak to future administrations and what they might choose to do. I mean, we do have some other properties, investment properties and stuff. So the church is always transacting business. But as far as like newsworthy things, not at this point in time. We feel like we've got a stable financial base. We have a plan, and we're just working that plan. That was one of the topics that came up at World Conference, was the potential sale of Community of Christ to buildings in Independence, known as the auditorium and our temple. And there was a resolution that came to conference that effectively said that those could not be sold if the conference had not approved their sale. And we ended up not considering that resolution because the resolution was conflicted with the church's bylaws and with the church's scriptural authority given to our presiding bishop. And so we can't consider resolutions that are in conflict with our bylaws in our scriptures. But we did talk about the temple and auditorium and how they are currently important to mission. As long as they continue to be important to mission and we are able to use them and be good stewards of them, then, we're certainly committed to their continuance. I think it's supposed to be continuance in Community of Christ. So this was back in June. Now we're getting these Christmas messages right now. Has something changed? I don't know. Maybe not, probably not, but what if since June, what if like new things have come to light? What if new strategies have been, discovered, using prophetic imagination? What if they've imagined, like a really good way forward? And it's like, oh, you know what? Actually, yes, let's go ahead and we'll sell these because we just came up with a really good idea. You see what I'm saying? That may have happened. That might be why they're putting out these messages, but I don't know. Or it may not have to do with the temple and auditorium. Maybe there's some other big change or something that may rub certain people the wrong way. I don't know. Let's see. I may just want to end it there. You can pause and read this. She just talks about the fact that with the sale of the Kirtland Temple, everything's going to be fine until 2030. But they need to figure something out if they want to continue the way that they are right now. This part talks about her story with the word onward. And then let's just read this last part again, because I feel like this is very revealing. President VZ, our previous president, he did this fabulous job in providing us this great foundation and really reestablishing who we are. And now we need to put it into action. And so my hope is that we've gotten beyond what you might call our phase of identity crisis, and it's clear who Community of Christ is in the world today. So, you guys, I was here to witness this, and there were these natural events that were taking place in conjunction with her ordination. So the first day, and I have this on my other spreadsheet, the first day of their world conference, that's when Canadian wildfire smoke started pouring in to the Kansas City area, including Independence. And every single evening of that conference, you had the Canadian wildfire smoke, and it was at times pretty dramatic. It made for some pretty nice sunsets. But you had Canadian wildfire smoke that was, making the sun darker, the way that we look at it. on the day that she was ordained, there was a strong geomagnetic storm that was supposed to produce aurora. I tried to see it. I may have just missed it, but no, there was somewhere in Missouri that saw the aurora. I remember finding that. But Canadian wildfire smoke, the aurora on the day that she was ordained, and then just a few days later, you had the tornado that's been the closest to the temple lot, at least since 1950. Okay. I feel like something happened with her ordination. And like I said before, I think it's going to be good for both churches. I wish them well. If this is the way that they want to go, then, there's not going to be any complaints from me, because I'm hoping to see this become a reality. But I wish them nothing but the best. And it's interesting to watch things play out. And for now, I'm just going to keep documenting what I see and what I hear. And if there's any news, I'll bring it to you. But that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.